Mr. Chairman. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. I'm George Topol. I'm the Union Township trustee and former past chairman, just about everything else. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the technical planning event, social event of the day. And maybe we can introduce everybody, since I've introduced myself.
Flor Baum, Administrative Assistant, Nursing.
Mitch Barlow, Nurse.
Kay Nelson, Northwest Indiana Forum.
Mark McDowell, Town of Chesterton. David Wright, Gary Public Transit.
Dean Button, City of Hammond.
Mary Kay Tim, Dyer Town Council.
Kelly Winger, NICD.
Rebecca Hammond, NICD Intern.
Beth Schrader, Valparaiso Transit.
Michael Jago, City of Valparaiso.
Ryan Lissick, Directing Indiana.
Donald Michael Stewart.
Kevin Lee, Nursing.
Amen.
Oh, Emmanuel Ruggie, Nursing.
Jake Damarel, Butler Permanent Cipher.
Denny Cobb.
Scott Pruitt, Fisher Engineering.
Courtney Anderson, Zero Group.
Christopher Murphy, Structure Point.
Steve Hughes, Nursing.
Grace Bender, Nursing.
Oh, yes, and we'd like to introduce our newest members to NERC. And could you say a little bit about where you came from?
Sure. I'm Stephen Hughes. I've been a land use regulation type of planner in Indiana and a couple communities, Richmond, Indiana, and Columbus, Indiana. I live in Chesterton now, and so my wife and I moved up here last summer, and I just started, 2 weeks ago.
I'm Grace Bender. I also started approximately 2 weeks ago. I was formerly the assistant planner for the city of LaPorte as well as the city of Crown Point, and most recently was the planning administrator for the city of Crown Point. I have a large background in GIS, and so I'm using visually.
Okay, and since you just walked in, you get to introduce yourself to the rest of the group.
Steve King, I'm the engineering administrator for the town of Maryville and the director of the street park.
Okay, and Scott and Charles, would you like to introduce yourself very quickly?
Sure. Scott Weber, Transportation Planner and Analyst at NERC. And
Charles Bradsky, Transportation Project Manager here at NERC.
Okay, now we'll proceed with getting the show on the road with the minutes of February 28, 2023. Has everyone had a chance to review them? If so, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. All those voting members that would like to approve, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion is approved, minutes are approved. Public comments on agenda items. Are there anybody that signed up? Anyone signed up? Okay, there's no one signed up, so we'll move right along to the list. Event planning 3.1, Northwest Indiana 2050 plus. Draft report. Take it away, Mitch.
Thank you. Good morning. Sorry it's a little late to the morning here. Sorry about all this old school stuff too. Sorry, Mary, if you're in the way. I'm sitting behind a pole at Wrigley
You
Field.
look really thin there when I.
Personality.
All right, so we are a planning organization, so we have a plan to show you. We are in the middle of our public comment period for the 2050 plus, because everything's a plus these days. And so what I'm going to do is do the proverbial 30,000 foot view for you. This is a document that is now online, and I will mention that momentarily. And there's a lot to it. So I'm not going to sit here and get as laborious as possible because we'd be here for hours just on one subject matter. There's a lot to cover in this region, and I want to make sure that at least you have a topiary viewpoint of it all, so then as you skim through this, hopefully you can give us some of your comments and feedback online. All right, so the background is, as many of you know, you NERC veterans, we have to do this every 4 years by federal standards. And every plan that we produce has to have at least a 20-year time horizon, hence why we are still in the 2050 phase. And we have another planning exercise in another 4 years. That'll be most likely either 2055 or 2060. There you go, fun with math. So we have that same horizon, and we had 4 major focus areas back in the 2050 plan. And if you don't remember it, I sure do. And they're on that wall over there too. But they were connected, renewed, vibrant, and united. And under these 4 banners, there were several different focuses, several different plans and goals and objectives that kind of cascaded down from those throughout the planning document. So we're not rewriting any of that. We are building on that. This is not a plan to start from scratch. We usually have plans and then we have updates. This is considered an update. So it's an update to 2050, hence the plus symbol. And what we're trying to do is add value to everything that we installed back in 2050. In 2050 had a lot to say about a lot of stuff, and now we want to do more pragmatic approaches to that as people move forward in implementing this in our region. We're going to read this in detail. Lies. That is the same board over there, okay? So this is our matrix of the vision statements. We have, again, the major 4 on the top, and then we broke these down into 4 major areas on the side here, and those are economy in place, environment, mobility, people, leaders, and then, of course, the matrix panned out as it did. So again, we are carrying this forward. Again, why recreate the wheel when the wheel's running just fine? So again, we are looking to just simply create these and find pragmatic solutions to make that work out. So the components of the 2050 plan are pretty straightforward, okay? We're making it easy for you to figure out. We have the introduction, then we have active transportation, climate and the environment, freight, land use and housing, roadways, and transit, okay? Taken together, that is quite a comprehensive view about how our region works in the sense of the physical infrastructure. Now, of these, we did the unique thing of hiring 3 different consultants to work on these sections. One consultant worked on 2, RDG out of Omaha, Nebraska, worked on active transportation, land use, and housing. We had Trans Systems, I believe, doing the transit plan for us. And Scott's here. Who did the freight?
CPCS Transcom.
CP. Thank you. They were the freight people. And if you have the opportunity, please look at the freight chapter. It is quite amazing. It is kind of the Prego chapter. Everything's in there. So it definitely takes the deepest dive of any of the chapters into the issues of freight that we have in our region. And the best part is we're bringing in these fresh minds, these outside experts, to kind of give us a better view on how to establish more of these 2050 goals and objectives going forward. Now, we worked in-house on roadways, we worked in-house on climate and the environment, and the introduction actually has our fiscal constraint tables that Charles had put together, as well as some commentary on economic development, because we're doing that as well. Just kind of a pause here in the presentation, we are required by the feds to put different ingredients into this plan, okay? Like any good one of these chef shows, right? You forget the ingredient, they're going to knock you right down. So we have to make sure they're all there. So they are, and of course, it's all being taken care of throughout these chapters. So I'm going to go through this briefly, each of the chapters, and what kind of highlights you are to expect. Well, first, within the introduction, we get into the public comment period. Any planning exercise that we take on has to have a very robust and very involved public comment period. We did that. This is the first time that we were at every county fair every day of the week. Not, hopefully dealing with pigs and everything else, but we're thankfully far enough from that. But we were there engaging people on the Midway at all 3 county fairs. And we were there for different shifts. Some people, this is Lake County, here's Porter County, and this is LaPorte County. This is our own Scott Weber actually jumping in midair to teach kids on where Michigan City is on a map, so thank you. So we have a giant map out there. We tried our best to engage people. I know some of you may have caught us at the county fairs, and we immediately grabbed you, and we said, where do you live? And we would talk about that and everything, and try to get them involved in how we think about land use and transportation. So a great interaction, great feedback that we received. I think we gave out over 2,000 flyers, and we engaged over 500 people, and staff worked over 400 hours combined. So that may have been our most intense outreach. Of course, we did other outreach. We had other open houses. We did some pop-up events at other events throughout the region as well. And of course, the many stakeholder meetings that our consultants were able to have with many of you here on these particular sections of the plan. So, first up is active transportation. This is pretty much what came out of it when we did all the exercises with the active transportation network. As you well know, we do a lot of trail planning here at NERC. It's pretty easy stuff when you have so many abandoned railroads to work with, and we have had a lot of fun converting those railroads over the years. I think now we're well over 150 miles converted. That's great, but people say just keep them on the trails, that's all you need. But the problem is, if you really want to create a true non-motorized network in this region or anywhere else, you have to make sure the infrastructure is in place to make it safe and comfortable for people to get around. It's pretty simple. I tell people, oh, you just want trails for bikes. I guess then you just want interstates for cars. And that's not going to be effective, right? I don't think anyone can pull into your garage off an interstate. Can't happen. If it is, well, you got some special arrangement with NDOT I'm not aware of. So you have to figure out a network of routes to finally get back to your own place of residence. The same has to apply as well. So this broad map, which is of course very difficult to make out from your distance, but what you see here possibly, if you can, with the green lines, those are our beloved trails that run through our region. These red lines, however, are proposed roadways that have been identified for possible through routes for bicycle and pedestrians in our region. They do not mimic our major corridors, like a 30, like a 41, like an Indianapolis Boulevard, Calumet Avenue. But what they try to do is get as close as possible to those routes to get people around as safely as possible. So they have the opportunity of going from community to community, neighborhood to neighborhood, to identify destinations, to make it practical for them to use a bike or to use their feet to get to those destinations. I live in Dyer. And right up from me are sidewalks that can get me to the Dairy Queen, that can get me to the Speedway and so forth. But many people don't have that option. I used to live in Crown Point, where I was just as far away from those uses as well, and it would be laborious to get there. There were very dangerous intersections I had to cross, lack of sidewalks altogether, and just very nasty motorists in the middle of it all. Of course, we have an auto-centric region, and we have an auto-centric country, and that is the drawback of it. So when we try to propose these roads, we try to propose infrastructure solutions. We talked about all different type of road typologies that you're going to experience in your community. These are only just a few of them. We kind of stretch it out, we broaden it out, and any of these road typologies you will find in your particular community and how you can handle those accordingly, and how you can apply different strategies and treatments to those. Some roadways will have a buffered bike lane, or we just have wide paths, or we have a separated lane, or we have a side path that's involved. It just kind of depends on where you're going and what you're doing and where you're at. And then we talk about a particular roadway that is in your area. Is it an urban collector? Is it a major arterial? What are those characteristics to kind of get you familiarized with those in your community? Infrastructure direction. What are those techniques to install to make those corridors bike and ped friendly? So we tried to make that clear to all of you. I'm a bicyclist, Charles is a bicyclist, and we will tell you straight up, it is a dangerous world for bicyclists, okay? As much as we want to see roads being legally used by bicyclists because they are, unfortunately, cars are still not of that mindset. And in the world of distracted driving, it's almost become the worst case scenario. It's almost impossible to plan with distracted driving, okay? And so we need these physical separations as much as possible and to start working on that through our corridors. And hopefully this plan will inspire communities throughout our region to do just that. let's go into climate and environment. This was put together by our environmental staff. These are some alarming statistics, the future climate. We're thinking by 2050, there will be 20 to 50 more days over 96 degrees. Okay? Just based on what scientists are saying about the 1 to 2 degree increase in our temperature worldwide, and then 2 to 7 more extreme precipitation events in our region as well. Okay? So we all hear about it, and we're experiencing it now to an extent, and it's not going to get any better if business as usual continues in our area. So what we are trying to highlight here is this Climate Action Northwest Indiana initiative. It shows that what's it all about here, a multi-stakeholder effort. I know there are several people in this room that do partake in this. Trying to encourage long-term action, engagement, and implementation of climate actions. 3 major documents are in process in helping solidify this goal with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Inventory, Climate Action Framework, and Climate Resilience Plan. So all of that together is being moved forward by this Climate Action Northwest Indiana. If you want to know more about it, I encourage you to please call or contact Kathy Luther or Jennifer Birchfield in our office, and they'll be more than happy to rope you into this. Right? Okay? Okay. So as for emissions themselves, I'm not a scientist, but it doesn't get much better. What we're trying to do is reduce gas emissions by the baseline of 2017 by 64 or 63% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. That's quite the ambitious goal, but that's the goal that we're trying to promote. So this is a table that I'm not going to stretch out because I don't have, I don't make that kind of money to figure that out. So we'll move on to other charts. These just kind of show you a couple of charts based on what is happening if we just simply take the emissions as business as usual. We don't do anything to try to reduce the emissions in our region. You can see with the industries involved, we are well over our targets, well over 2030, way over 2050 target. If you remove the industry, it gets better with the industrial pollutants out of the way, but still, we have a long way to go. So there are still strategies that need to be implemented and action need to be taken. And so that is a major part and focus of the climate and environment section. And then conservation is another focus as well, trying to make sure that our areas of conservation are preserved, that the policies are followed within these areas, and that we can limit the amount of growth into these areas and kind of keep them natural for, of course, just environmental processes as well as just future enjoyment of our region as well. And so we want to make sure that continues forward, and those are looked at detail in this chapter. Freight, as I talked about before, freight. I think I'm going to wind the freight chapter to 5 main maps here. So the first map talks about all the freight system. If you didn't know anything about Northwest Indiana, you would know quickly that we are a freight area. We have a lot of freight. Okay, we have a lot of ways freight get around. We have the airports, we have the port of Indiana, we have all these lovely railroads through our region. We have pipelines, and of course we have the roadways network as well, getting cargo through our region on a daily basis. Of course, the proximity of Lake Michigan has crunched many of these freight corridors into this region, hence why we have bottlenecks, hence why we see a lot of freight travels through our region. So freight is a major issue in Northwest Indiana, and we want to make sure that we can improve the freight mobility here and the safety of freight as well, between, of course, people just trying to get around the region and freight movement. And when it comes to that road and rail safety, this is kind of an alarming map showing about all the truck-related casualties and the rail casualties that have happened. I think this is probably a source. It's probably, is it a yearly? Is this a year, or is over time?
I mean, that's a certain year, it's 2022.
Okay, so you got a couple of years thrown in there. So as you can see, quite a bit's going on, and you would imagine most of these accidents and most of these conflicts are going to happen on the larger roadways with more average daily travel, 65 and 80, 94. But of course, they scattered themselves throughout all the region here. Belshaw Road is not off the map in Lowell and places. So we have all these conflicts, and we're trying as a planning organization to kind of smooth these out region-wide. The mobility issues, of course, not only do we have the traffic we have mobility with all the congestion here. This talks about mobility issues at block crossings. We talk about the bottlenecks throughout the region for the traffic on the roadways. No surprise, our top bottlenecks will be on 8094 here, one of the most congested corridors in all of the country. We get into the infrastructure condition. Okay, we want to not only have good movement of freight, we want to have safe movement of freight, and we also want us to be safe as well. We have a lot of bridges that are now in poor condition, and we have pavement that is in poor condition. This is outlined in detail in the study, where those hot spots are in our region and where they need focus. And then we talk about all the gaps by type in our region. Okay, we have gaps, mobility gaps, we have rail gaps, we have road gaps, and we have all sorts of gaps regarding where needs to be made regarding new investment in this region to improve these gaps in the mobility of our freight. And this pretty much serves as the blueprint of how we move forward in improving these networks in Northwest Indiana. So within about 3 to 4 minutes, I condensed down 150 pages. Okay, so obviously there's a lot going on there. It's a tremendous chapter if you haven't had a chance. There's so much in there regarding the types of freight that are actually dealt with in Northwest Indiana. It will definitely keep your head spinning a while, knowing what comes through this region on a daily basis and how important we are to the environment, to the economy of not only here, but also throughout the entire country. It is quite robust. Now, land use and housing is a major factor in any regional plan. This is a big giant map of our region showing you all the land uses in Northwest Indiana, okay? It's hard to kind of read. Residential, of course, you have this kind of lighter yellow of residential throughout the area. But all this kind of faded green is more or less agriculture. We are primarily an agriculture region by landmass, but that's changing in many areas, especially Lake County, which is growing has been growing quite well. Porter County growing a lot more vigorously, and now we're getting some growth spurts in northern LaPorte County as well. So we need to address land use. We need to address the strains of land use, how we can promote good land use practices. And there are a series of maps here. I'm not going to try to get into crazy detail about it all, but we do basic demographics, what's happening in the changes of our population, what's happening in the changes of our housing stock here in the region. We try to promote different housing strategies as well, how to make sure we can ensure the balance of good housing that is available in our region for all residential incomes. And then we talk about down here the type of land consumption that should be best focused on in our region. Again, it's a great analysis of looking at proposals that this region can either embrace or reject, or hoping they will embrace it. We have different proposals here for land consumption. Some of it here talking about sprawl. Here we're talking about a much better use of density mixes that we all can agree with. We're trying to incorporate this idea of a walkable and livable environment. And the time frame on that has been kind of pegged at 15 minutes. The 15-minute city, you may have heard of it now. It's kind of coming up in vernacular. But how can you get around your neighborhood comfortably within 15 minutes by bike or by foot? Okay, because that's a comfortable time frame for people to travel. And you should have most of your daily needs within that, maybe not where you work, but definitely any of your daily needs, your shopping, any kind of groceries, any kind of other things that you need to attend to, your post office and so forth, should be within that time frame. And again, strategies such as these that are proposed in this chapter help bring people to that understanding. We have, of course, a plethora of maps and analysis throughout this chapter. We talk about the Centers and Corridors framework. Now, this is a plan here that talks about where we want to see growth happen in our region. We highlight many different areas where there are these centers of growth, cities and town centers. We did a livable centers plan many years ago that we're trying to build off of and try to fortify here through a plan like this. So we're trying to channel growth throughout these circular areas. And then we talked about these other areas as well, some other corridors that have been popping up over the years. We produced policies and some strategies on how to handle development within those established corridors, make them more accessible, again, make them more livable within those areas as well. But again, try to keep away from this this sprawl pattern, trying to continue to expand into green fields. There's plenty of developed land out there already that can be utilized, and people desire to live closer to other uses. It's just a desire for people nowadays, okay? So the old sprawl mentality is something that people are kind of taken back, and they are getting a lot more friendly with higher density development. And then we talk about land consumption as well, and we talk about how the scenarios play out there. Again, how that is built up over time and what the preferred scenario is for land use in our region. Again, much more condensed. And then, of course, we talk about environmental corridors. Like I talked about in the environment chapter, those chapters basically tag team here to keep these corridors free and clear so they can be enjoyed, that the wildlife and the ecological processes within them can continue forward undisturbed. And those need to be kept in mind too as we develop throughout this region as well. So again, we have plenty, and it's been the case in this region for years, we have plenty of land that can be assembled and developed here without having to go into new areas, okay? And so we want to make sure that that is kept in mind as new land uses go forward. And again, what we do here with these chapters, this is a quick sidebar, as I always tell people, we advise and inspire at NERC. None of this is legally binding on any community, okay? But we are proud of the fact that we have worked with stakeholders all along this time to make these recommendations come to fruition. We have seen some great examples from communities throughout this region. We want to basically piggyback on some of that and to promote some of that to other communities as well. So keep that in mind as we go along here. Of course, what would our region be without roads? Not very accessible. And the roadway network here, we take a dive into what's going on with our functional classification network. What are the absolute routes here? What are they located? And of course, we get into identifying what those routes are in our region. And then we get into what's happening on those roadways. We talked about pavement condition. We did that in the freight chapter as well. But we also talk about crash hotspots. If there's something that we want to see less of, it's crashes, fatal and otherwise. We heard about Vision Zero. We've heard about these things, trying to keep crashes, in that case, bicycle pedestrian crashes, down to as low as zero as possible. But as you can tell, we do have a very good idea where crashes are happening, basically where the people are, and around those, again, those areas where you do have those high traffic volumes happening. A lot going on here in the Hammond area. And again, that helps us as planners help focus in on these particular areas to kind of assist these communities on strategies to reduce the number of accidents that are happening in these areas. Of course, one good way is trying to promote alternate transportation methods. Trails, we have done trails for years in the sense of promoting alternate transportation. We have some very good trails that actually exist within this corridor. The Erie-Lackawanna, I think, was right through this high crash area, okay? So you're not going to get a high crash, fatalities on trails. It just doesn't happen. You might get skinned up if you do run into a bicycle, but usually the people more or less can get off of roadways. And it's not about eliminating car traffic. It never was. It's about mode shift, getting more people to use bicycles for utilitarian purposes and providing them the safe means to do so. As I arc back to the active transportation chapter, that's a promotion that we're trying to continue on with. And let's see, what else do I have? Oh, of course, transit. And this is all alphabetical, not that transit is the last part, David. Okay. But active transportations have to be first. Oh, you like trails. No, it's alphabetical, trust me. So transit is, again, another chapter that took a deep dive into some ideas. First of all, laying out what the existing network is in Northwest Indiana. This gives you all the bus routes that are happening. It gives you where the NICD line is existing at this time. And of course, areas where there is some, maybe some dial-a-ride assistance. But it also gets into demand. These color shifts that you see on the map here from the dark green to the orange, you talk about demand levels from green, which is a demand, just basically a medium demand, up to the red and orange, much higher demands. And you see the higher demands where there are a lot more people that are living and people that have environmental justice concerns, who lack vehicles, who need that transit access to get around this region. Unfortunately, people fail to understand that transportation is a very difficult issue for many people, and we have to keep that in mind. And We want to make sure that transit options exist and that people can get around the region more via these transit options. So this particular chapter, working with transit stakeholders and others, talked about two system proposals that came out of it. One was called the grid system. The basic issue of the grid system is that riders would transfer for longer trips at street intersections, as you can see here identified on the map. This is not a timed transit route, so they are more frequent. There's no longer than 30-minute headway between each of the buses, and 10 new routes were proposed with this grid system. The other system that was proposed in the transit chapter was the hub system. Now, the hub system has riders transfer for longer trips at several hubs throughout the region, and these are time transfers, so you definitely know when a particular bus is showing up to these particular hubs. Now, hubs are not on the street intersections. They are predetermined areas where these buses would arrive at. 9 new routes were identified, and after all that was said and done, and all the analysis and all the math, this was the preferred route that is actually spelled out in the plan itself. There were a number of reasons why the hub system was the preferred route. One of them being the cost effectiveness of it. It does reach more locations in our region, and it's a much more flexible proposal as well. So that taken into account is what we promote here going forward with transit. And going forward with that as well, we have a transit stakeholders group. We now have a transit planner that has been hired. Thank you, Stephen. And now that we have a plan for it, hopefully we can start working with stakeholders towards this goal. And comment period. As I told you before, we're in the thick of this comment period. It is running till May 5th. The full plan, everything that I talked about, you can see all of it to your heart's content on our website at that link, NRPC.org, NWI-2050, and you'll be able to read it. All of the chapters are there for you. You can submit comments online or by regular postage, snail mail. We still do accept that. Now, we are going to recommend plan approval, at least recommend approval. The goal is to have that done by next month. So when we see you back next month, we'll have our comments in tow, and we'll be able to address them accordingly and propose the final draft plan to you. And then the commission is supposed to approve this in May, and there's a conformity issue as well in the middle of it that Scott and Charles will get into that momentarily. So, and then we will have 2 more open houses. We do have open houses for the plan. We just had one last night at Purdue Northwest. We have one tomorrow in Michigan City at their library, and we conclude our public open houses Thursday at the Porter County Government Center in Valparaiso. And we've already had a comment open house last week in the town of Maribel. So that would be it for me. That's your large overview. As I said before, this doesn't really do it justice. The plan itself is over 500 some pages. Most of those are graphs and pictures, so don't get too crazy. Lots to look at, and we really encourage you to take a good look. Like I said, we've had, for the first time, these outside consultants really dive deep into our region and give us some real good proposals on how to move forward on improving our transportation networks, our land use thinking, and just improving our quality of life altogether. So that's it, and I'll answer any questions I can, or staff is here if it's a particular matter to their chapter.
Which I might mention at the chamber, or the Porter County open house will be in the chambers the May 4th. The garage is open, it starts at 3:30, I think it was.
4 to 6. Both are 4 to 6, by the way. I don't have the time on there, but both are 4 to 6. Yes, thanks, Kevin. Thank you. We'll be, yes, Mike.
Having worked through the process of what we're all here today to talk about and working on committee last week. Years ago, we used to list projects as significant, things like that, and then we soon would drop that. It's vague. Is that going to return in this version?
Charles, can you address projects of significance, or Scott?
So if I understand you correctly, in the past, the term regionally significant project, as it means in the federal lingo, means a project that would trigger an air quality performance determination because it's deemed an expansion project. So like that has a very specific meaning to us in the planning world. It's not to say every project is significant in a sense, because we've all decided on it as a board collectively in this committee, but I you might be referring to regionally significant that you might have seen in our planning projects in the past that has a very specific meaning of if it meets certain thresholds of being an expansion project, and it's regionally significant. So we will call those out, but they just have more attention to this application.
Because I'm thinking like Kennedy Avenue in Cherville, Porter County's Willow Creek Road, projects like that, they continue to be called out in this case.
Yeah, mainly in the conformity document that accompanies it, because that's where we're actually required to show that, but we will also show that in the plan itself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
We have all those, we can hand it over to Chairman Breitsky.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for bearing with us. We'll continue with programming, the public comment report for the adoption of fiscal year 2024 to 2028 for the TIF, Mr. Bradsky. And he'll follow it up with the discussion of resolution 2305.
Scott, go ahead and come up here. So I will begin with reading the public comment report, which has changed because the public comment technically ended last Friday, April 7th. The draft tip, including all public comments, the draft tip was uploaded, was out for public comment and ended. NERC did not receive any public comments during the public comment period. NERC did conduct a public meeting, open house, Wednesday, April 5th in Maryville, and no comments were received during the public meeting. NERC did submit the draft tip to NDOT and USDOT, that's the Federal Highway and FTA. 2 comments of concern were received from Federal Highway. The first comment revolved around a small deficit showing in 2024 and in 2026 for both UZAs and in 2026 for the Michigan City UZA. This is being corrected. 2024, it has been corrected. The second comment related to the funds that were recently loaned to another MPO, which were not fully described in the tip. And that is being worked on, and I will get that taken care of here shortly. That's the public comment report. So, Scott, go ahead. And we are not going to be putting the, so there is no 4.2 now.
Well, here's the issue. Okay, so we just got off a virtual meeting with our interagency consultation group of air quality, which includes Federal Highway Administration, just before this meeting. So we haven't fully had time to discuss with all of our management and all of our staff what the opportunities are. But we have been made aware of the fact that because we have trouble demonstrating air quality conformity for this 2024 to 2028 tip, for a whole host of reasons, I won't go into them because we'd be here all day, that the best option for us, instead of adopting a new 2024 to 2028 tip, would basically be to amend our existing 2022 to 2026 tip with the 2024 and 2025 projects that would have been in the 2024 to 2028 tip, and instead amend those in May into our existing 2022 to 2026 tip. Now, I understand that basically eliminates, the NOVA was really only for 27 and 28 funds, so the vast majority of folks here would just have to wait until we resolve our air quality conformity issues and then eventually adopt our new 2024 to 2028 tip, which we hope to do in the summer. That's probably about how long it would take to revise the budgets. But it mainly affects NDOT projects and potentially some transit projects that would have been newly in the 2024 to 2028 tips in the year of 2024 and 2025.
The projects, though, there are projects that
Yes.
were awarded, mainly the CRP and the Protect funds. So those, we did have funds in 24 and 25. So we are going to amend the 22 to 26 tip and keep working with that. And then projects, and we continue working with the 22 to 26 tip until we can fix the conformity issue with Federal Highway, with the USDOT and NDOT. I think it's mainly USDOT, Federal Highway is the one that's speaking the loudest.
But we have been made aware that if we were to take that action and amend those 2024 and 2025 projects into our 2022 to 2026 tip in May, that would not prevent NDOT from, it would not hold up any of NDOT's processes for their new statewide transportation improvement program. So that's kind of what we've been made aware of, where we stand. I won't discuss the whole situation with the NWI 2050 Plus plan at this point, because we haven't had time to let it marinate and talk through it with stuff. But if anybody has any questions, I could try to answer.
But the bottom line is everything stays on schedule. It's just a matter of a formality.
Well, no. The tip will be adopted later on, probably in July, it sounds like. We're gonna put it. So we've already done the public comment period. And if anything else, we may have to do a short public comment period in June. But right now, it seems like Federal Highway is giving us credit for doing the public comment that we did. But we may not be able to approve, we cannot approve our tip until this gets resolved. And we're hoping that this can get resolved more expeditiously than unexpeditiously. So, but that means we probably won't have it in time for May. We're gonna try to get it on the May TPC docket. No guarantees on that.
I can pretty much guarantee that, at least when it comes to the new tip, it would not be in May because of the fact that EPA's process requires a 60-day period from when we revise the air quality budgets, and they have to go through the Federal Register, and they usually have a 60-day period for that.
So we're looking at maybe July.
So yeah, we'd be looking at probably July.
Okay. As you can see, we hadn't really digested all of this, so we're working on this as it's live. So, okay.
Is this related to EPA redesignation from moderate to severe for non-attainment?
My understanding is that, yes, essentially what happened was we were redesignated to severe a couple years, maybe a few years ago now. Already time flies. But last year they did manage to, IDEM did work to get us back into a maintenance, so they demonstrated attainment. But the consequence of that is that document that went in last spring of 2022 that redesignated us from severe to maintenance also set us with very tight budgets for our conformity process, and that we're unable to meet with several other the planning processes that have been going on with our travel demand model update and such. So because we were unable to meet conformity with those tighter budgets that they put in place last year, that we're going to have to revise those budgets upward a little bit. And that's why we'll have to go through the EPA process to do that. But IDEM has already agreed to work with us on that.
David.
Now that you have a transit plan, thank you, and you've got a bit more time before the 27 to 28 projects are added to the tip, I am requesting a individual meeting with the grantees on their projects. This is something that's not happened. I mean, there have been 2 or 3 meetings apiece on active transportation and highway projects in that program of projects that was discussed at the last TPC, but nothing on the transit. We now have time for that. Sometime in late April or early May, I would recommend that Charles, Stephen, come to our shop, lay out our projects, lay out your thoughts on any adjustments that you made and how they'd be funded. Do the same thing for the sub-grant. I'm not sure if you're going to have individual meetings with them, but that way when we actually approve a program of projects for 26 and 28 later on this summer, we'll actually have a transit tip that's caught up with the other ones. I really appreciate that. And again, come to our shop, see if we can get a look at, how things operate downstairs with the bus system. And we can get a much better view of what is going on with the transit tip.
That shouldn't be a problem. We could also do it at a transit operators roundtable. But definitely a sightseeing trip.
Yeah. I do suggest that, individual conversation with each grantee would be worthwhile.
Noted. Any other comments, questions? Denny?
So is this going to be primarily affecting projects with added travel, with added lane capacity? Because everything else doesn't really impact air quality.
So it's complicated, but unfortunately, we are not allowed to adopt a 24 to 28 tip because we're in a non-attainment area unless we can demonstrate conformity. That's just, end of the day, that's the issue. And so we have to then revert back to our most recent already conforming tip, which in this case is 22 to 2026. But unfortunately, in Federal Highway's eyes, they only look at the first 4 years. They only look out to 2025. So therefore, we're only allowed to move exempt projects from 24 and 25 going forward into INDOT's process for their statewide tip. So we can't really act on anything beyond 2025 until we fix the air quality conformity issue.
Okay, as a follow-up, if I may, the document that was included in the materials for today didn't look like what we had verbally talked about and approved in prior sessions. So what's going on? For instance, Highlands project, Hawk project's not on there. Kennedy Avenue in Hammond, not on there.
So
other projects are
right.
on there, but the funding is different.
So I'll have to look at what's in the RTIP versus what's in the spending plan. Yeah, if that's a problem, RTIP belongs to, I'm the one who manages RTIP. I'm the one who manages the spending plan. So if there's an inconsistency there, then I guess that falls on me. So and that's where I've always said, if you see something, say something. It's all over Dixie Strings, I think.
That's more for safety and security, just to be clear, okay? Not public funding.
But I was just saying that lightheartedly. But the projects belong to, Hammond's projects belong to Dean, Valparaiso's projects belong to Mike, and Maryville's projects belong to Steve. Same with Chesterton and GPTC and everybody else in the room. So if your project doesn't look like what we've agreed upon, let me know. And I think it's shown in the past that the owners of that project need to work with me and getting that fixed. So the consultants, I rely on the consultants because you guys have your fingers in a lot of different communities and you know a lot more about the pulse of what's going on than maybe some of the communities do, because you see more holistic picture because you've seen a region-wide picture. So if you need to get on the LPAs to call me and call me out, then please do.
Thank you, Denny. Anybody else have any questions? That's pretty much, that's gonna be your report for today?
Yes, and there's nothing, 4.2 is being pulled from the agenda.
Yes.
So remember we had that session last December, we talked about escalation. So basically, as far as rental projects, that has already been considered, or that would be the project?
Escalation?
Yeah, remember we increased costs of projects that were already in the tip.
Yes. And projects were moved out 1 year or thereabouts.
That will be reflected in this tip.
It should be, it should be. But now that I need to look at what's in the tip, what's in our tip and spending plan and resolve that. Apparently I've got a couple issues there from what I've been hearing this morning. Might take a look.
So we're going to delay the action that's requested for today and just move on.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. I don't see any other questions. Topical committee reports. Do we have any reports from the topical committees? Mr. Barlow, why don't you start?
Well, we're all pretty much meeting this month. If you can see the bottom of your agenda, we have different meetings taking place, so just be on the lookout for those.
Anybody else? Do you have anybody from Drive Clean Indiana today?
Yes. So I have these printed out if anyone would like to have them. So update, School Town of Munster received their first electric school bus 2 weeks ago. Green Fleet audits completed for Valparaiso Community Schools, Valparaiso Refuse, and Valparaiso Transit. We did have our EV boot camp on April 6th last week here at NERC. We just had under 40 people. We have upcoming fleet audits for City of Crown Point, Porter County Sheriff. We do have some interesting funding opportunities that are due this week through the EPA. Additionally, we do have Clean Energy to Communities opportunity that is due May 8th. This is a need for interested cities that are wanting to plan funding around EV infrastructure. We do have a charging and fueling infrastructure program application that we're going to be working on. Basically, what it breaks down to is $350 million that's available for community charging, $350 million that's available for alternative fuel corridor funding. Applications are going to be due May 30th. We have our Indiana Clean School Bus Consortium that is going on currently right now. And then we are going to be doing a virtual Indiana Transportation Electrification Boot Camp that's on this Friday. So please follow up, go to our website for more information of that. We have Northwest Indiana Earth Day coming up at the Porter County Expo Center on the 22nd of this month. And then there's the second annual Earth Month Extravaganza on the 29th of this month. We have our Northwest Indiana Partners for Clean Air Luncheon and Awards, May 5th. And then we have another NERC EV 101 boot camp coming up on June 1st. And we have our annual conference coming up on August 23rd. Please go to our website. Please contact me after the meeting today for more information.
Thank you. Do we have any other planning partners here today? Anybody from Illinois? If not, the upcoming meetings are listed on the agenda. We have anything else good for the order? Yes, Mr. Barclay. Pransky.
He's okay with that.
Yeah. A little bit slower than the other day. I noticed that T-Rock is missing. T-Rock is on May 23rd. And then we're also going to be having local quarterly meetings, starting 1st of May.
So T-Rock will have Porter and Lake on the 23rd, on the morning of the 23rd, or will be there.
Yes, and then transit operators I'm not sure when that's gonna be. I have to get with Stephen and get something going. But I think they just have a sub-recipient meeting, so we should probably start getting that going and then get that on schedule.
Sounds like a commitment. Thank you. Kate has a question. Kate?
I didn't want to interrupt Mitch as he was going through. That was a good presentation, Mitch, to cover all that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The public meeting events that you've had, how many people showed up at the various ones?
Are you talking about last year or?
Whatever that you outlined, a number of meetings that were held for the 2050 plus.
I wasn't at all the meetings. I mean, we had some kickoff open houses last year that I believe we were in several different communities, I think 4 or 5 original.
Yeah.
And I think I averaged about 10 to 15 for those initial ones. And then during the summer, we were at, there was a Juneteenth event in Maryville that we showed up, kind of a pop-up event. And then we did those county fairs where we interacted with hundreds of people and talked to them directly. So the event that we had last week in Maryville, sadly enough, only one person showed up. Last night, 4 people showed up. So we're doing our best to try to get the word out, but in this age of virtual, people would rather see it that way, I guess.
Years ago when the Radisson still was standing, there was a very large meeting that was held for a 2010, 2000.
2040, actually.
Was it 2040?
Yeah.
So it wasn't as far back as I thought. But, I mean, why wasn't there, or was there maybe, and I missed it, a afternoon session for elected officials, city council persons, business community, et cetera, to come and see a presentation?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I hate to punt, I'm going to. It's always good to pick on the guy on the left, but our previous boss, Thomas Dow, was in charge of this process, and this was the avenue we took towards its creation. You're talking about going way back to John Swanson, our former executive director, who had that foresight and packed in the room with 800 people.
Yeah.
And it was a great event, and I wish we could replicate that, but do what I'm told.
Yeah, if I can add something to that. At that time, we had also, John Swanson got like a good budget for the 2040 plan, and we were able to hire America's Teams, which is a very large public outreach, and they did all the effort. In this one, like, we are doing the effort ourselves. So that's what makes a difference. If you have a specific big budget for public outreach, it makes a big difference.
Budget helps. By the way, we do have a video too that's on our website that gets into even more details. It's about an hour long, so I spared you that. But it's about an hour long, and you can see that video. It has about 50 views to date after the first week, so we're getting people looking online. But yeah, nothing compared to what you're referring to. And I like to return to those days too.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with Mark earlier about the absence of engagement in general following COVID, but it was even diminishing before COVID from that standpoint. And it's really a shame because a lot is going into all these various plans, the Ignite plans being updated. The Ready grants are in place and active, and a new second iteration is coming up, and it's very difficult to get people to pay any attention, and I don't know what the missing link is. I mean, granted, having a nice budget for an outside firm is good, but you still have to get people to show up, and I know that we've got a couple of industry projects that we're trying to identify how to better improve our options of getting people to show up, so I'm always asking questions.
The missing link is pizza. That's just very good.
Being the outside person in the room, I'm sitting in proxy for Mary Tanis, and being new to all this, plus not a politician, but I have been recently elected. I can tell you that personally, just coming into this room and having conversations with people, the disengagement is because we feel like it doesn't make a difference if you ask questions or have an opinion.
there's already a set agenda, and by the way, we're gonna force feed this to you. This is what we want, we've got all these charts and graphs, and don't you like it? Just say yes. So I think that that's, and when you have political officials that can come in, like the meeting you were talking about, they can come back with a little bit better idea, because I have had conversations with some people, and I can come back with a little bit of perspective, or at least I can look a little bit more, and then bring back something to the people that are my constituents in my ward, and say, this is important for you to participate. Not get angry about it later, let's participate now, so we can get that trickle-down effect. But from this standpoint,
But the
it's been
process,
chosen.
the process allowed for community engagement and involvement through each of the steps, right? I mean, Mitch reached out to us on active transportation, and we met with the consultant, and so the communities were involved. I can't necessarily say the elected officials were involved in the process, but they engaged the communities in preparing this. So maybe there's just a missing explanation, but I think they're doing the best they can now.
I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying,
No,
from an outside.
I'll interject this because I failed to. Thank you, Dean, for that. We had an online survey that was on and active for almost a year, and for that, we collected nearly 500 responses to it. We wanted 1,500, we got 500. I mean, we're talking about a region of nearly 800,000 people, so a bit paltry, but we're trying. I mean, that's the best we can. And, obviously the stuff we're talking about, it's everyday stuff that people seem to kind of brush off, but it's extremely critical. And they should be a lot more engaged than they are.
Well, it's not just you. We don't have a lot of in-person engagement for a public forum last week in Hammond. However, when we announced the public forum, that announcement on social media was our second most engaged post. So we put off a public hearing for that same project to May, but instead of just putting out a public hearing notice, we're also going to announce a public comment period, because obviously people, maybe in post-COVID, they're much more comfortable sitting behind their computer and providing a comment. And we'll lead them into the public record at our May board meeting. But we're pivoting for the same reasons that nurses.
Then I have a second question. I had a very angry person behind me at the stoplight the other day, because there was a bicyclist in my lane, which was a right-hand turn lane onto 30, and can you turn right on red in front of a bicyclist that's in the wrong lane?
As a bicyclist was in the wrong lane.
He was going straight.
That's not legal. I mean, if the bicycle's going straight, it was either right-hand turning lane going straight, we shouldn't be there. The bicyclist is wrong, yeah.
Not that I would want to be in that straight lane, because that's, it's over by a.
Well, you have to go where movements are predictable, and obviously, you don't want to go straight in the right turn lane, you're not predictable. I mean, and obviously, this is the whole problem with our bike and bed network. It's just not a safe network, but that bicyclist needs to, rise in traffic.
So is there someplace I go to find the law? Because I would love to put my car in park, walk the thing back. To me, it was common sense. I'm not going to pull out in front of a bicyclist to make a right-hand turn. Life's too short for all of us.
The Indiana code has it all laid out, so I can send you that.
Thank you. I appreciate seeing.
Sure.
I didn't put them off. I wanted to. And I put that in the minutes.
It's actually recorded. We don't. YouTube has it on.
Charles might have been the last. There are a couple different options, but I think a lot of it comes down to education for cyclists. I will admit it, there are a lot of rude cyclists out there. I encounter them on the trails. I encounter them, and when I'm out there riding, and the group I ride with, we try to be courteous and kind to the motorists, because we're hoping they'll pay back. Next time they encounter us or someone else, they may. But then again, we stop at the stop signs, or at least slow down at stop signs. If there's no one around, I still slow down. My reasoning is, me and my bike, we're like 250 pounds, and your car is what, 2 tons? I know that who's going to win. So But anyway, I think a lot of it goes back to education. A lot of people don't realize that you're not supposed to be riding a bike on the sidewalk. So, if you're on a bike, you need to be in the street or on the trail and so that's where there's a lot of disconnect. I don't think it's being taught in schools anymore, or maybe it should be taught at, I don't know where it should be taught, but I think there's just education for cyclists. And then that would go into motorists. I mean, we teach the kids, and when they grow up and as they're motorists, then they know that if you're going straight and there's a right turn lane, you need to get over into that straight through lane, be off to the right, but be on that straight through lane, so that motorists want to turn right, you turn.
I didn't blame the guy. I mean, it was Mississippi Street and 30. It's kind of a crazy intersection at 7:30 in the morning, so, but the guy behind me really made me mad, being so rude. Thank you.
Anything else good for the cause? Not, do I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, May 9th at 10 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Cole.